You know, I'm Thank you, Deeptila. Thank you for everyone who's joining in person and also online. Welcome. The weather has held out for us this weekend, which is very nice. Last weekend we got rained out a little, so it's very nice that we can be here together today. So most of you know it is Sakadawa month. So the fourth month in the Tibetan calendar is the month of Sakadawa. And the Tibetans celebrate on the 15th of Sakadawa, the celebration of the Buddha's birth, as well as his enlightenment, as well as his parinirvana. The Tibetan tradition says they all happened on the same day. And that's the 15th of the Tibetan month, of the fourth month. So today is, I think, the 5th of the Tibetan month. And they say the whole month of Sakadawa is an incredibly powerful month to accumulate merit, right? The whole month is merit, multiplies your merit by engaging in specific and dedicated practice during this month. So it's a great opportunity that we can come together today to study and to practice and to meditate together. There will be a puja here on Sakadawa. It's, I think, a Wednesday. So there'll be a puja in the evening led by Venerable Gache, who's another monk from Sarah. But that'll all be in the schedule, so you can look to that. But for this whole month, it's a good opportunity to remember to practice with more energy and more zeal. So let's start by creating a sacred space for ourselves, whether we are here in the center together or we are at home. Whatever our busy everyday life has been, our worldly activities throughout the morning, we can put those to the side and allow our awareness to come to this space. Allow all of our focus to be on our spiritual journey, on our study, our meditation, in order that we may progress towards Buddhahood. The purpose of this series on Sundays is to help us learn how to take the teachings of the Buddha and bring them into our everyday life, right? So the more we practice, the more we become familiar with these teachings, we lessen the division between our everyday life and our spiritual practice. That's the goal. But until we get there, it's useful to be very clear when we're engaging in a practice of study, so we don't mix worldly thoughts with our practice. So we let all of our worldly activities in the morning pass away, focus on our practice today. We'll set a very strong motivation. We've come together today to study the teachings of the Buddha, to listen, to contemplate, to meditate. We've come together for these reasons, not for our own benefit alone, but so that we might be of benefit to others. We recognize that as we progress on the path out of samsara towards Buddhahood, that is the best way we can be of service to others. So with the ardent and genuine wish to be of service to other sentient beings, to bring them happiness, to relieve their suffering in whatever way is possible, their worldly suffering and their spiritual suffering, we progress ourselves on the path. We tame our own minds in order that we might develop the wisdom and the compassion and all the other techniques necessary in order to be of greater service to others. So set the strong intention that the reason we are here together today is so that I might be of service to others, and I might tame my mind, I might develop my own spiritual practice so I can help others. In setting that strong motivation, we will offer a few prayers. So in the Gold Prayer Book, on page 32, 34. What I'd like to start doing is getting our center members trained as unzes, unze being chant leader. And that way, whoever's teaching doesn't have to do the leading of the prayers. They can just say what prayers are going to happen, and different center members can lead the prayers. Most of them, the ones we recite in English, we don't have tunes for anyway. So they're very easy. You just have to be confident enough to lead them. So hopefully in the next couple months, we'll be able to train people who are here in person to help lead the prayers. So if that's something you're interested in, either online or in person, let us know, because it's something we'd like to expand for our volunteer group. But so for today, I will lead them. So we'll recite Refuge and Bodhicitta 3 times in Tibetan and then once in English. And then the rest will continue in Tibetan until we get to the mandala. Sangye Chudan Soki Chonam La Jancho Paru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonam Gi Drola Penche Sangye Drupar Kro Sangye Chudan Soki Chonam La Jancho Paru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonam Gi Jola penche sange drupar sho saenge Chedan soki chonam la jancho bardo dagni kapsu ji Dagi jinsoki pe sonam gi Jola penche sange drupar sho. I go for refuge in time enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain unto the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. So mandala offering, we'll offer once in Tibetan and then once in English. So this is visualizing a purified world system that you're offering to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You're offering it in request for teachings as well as request for blessings. Ni de ge ha di sange shi du mi te Roku Namanda Xing This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kamniryatayami. Let's continue with praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, page 72. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely imperfect, completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, and completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime, pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms, and all aspects, with supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See, condition things as such. Through these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from Samsara's ocean, perturbed by the ways of aging, sickness, and death. Great. Thank you. So I'm happy to be here this morning to continue our discussion of how the practical ways benefits we can have from our spiritual practice. You know, so much of our lives is spent searching for contentment, right? We're just trying to find happiness in some way. And if we want to have contentment in all that we do, what we really need is to develop a healthy relationship with reality, right? We have to understand the world around us. We have to understand our reaction to the world and our experiences in the world. That healthy relationship to reality is what allows us to stay even keeled when things go up or down. So we don't have an immediate reactionary response, right? Which is what our habit is. And the way we develop that understanding of the nature of reality is by working to accumulate both method and wisdom. So generating compassion and bodhicitta and all of the practices that accompany those and the prajnaparamita practices. And then wisdom. So understanding the nature of reality and the selflessness of all phenomena. So we have these 2 aspects of method and wisdom and what are called the 2 accumulations, right? The accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. By working in both of these ways, it allows us to understand the nature of the world around us and how we relate to other sentient beings in the world. So developing that realization and then meditating on it so it becomes inseparable from our mind, that is what allows us to find contentment in all that we do. So our minds aren't immediately upset when things don't go our way or when things go really well. We can appreciate those things that happen that are favorable, but we don't go out of control. We don't grasp onto them as if they were real happiness. And when things are unfavorable or difficult circumstances, we don't feel overwhelmed by that, and we can deal with them in an appropriate way, right? So we need to continually work on these two aspects, method and wisdom. Here, the method is what we mean by compassion or bodhicitta. So bodhicitta being the wish, that ardent wish that has as its object the suffering of all sentient beings, and realizes that I want to achieve perfect, complete Buddhahood for the benefit and the sake of other sentient beings, not for myself. So that is what defines bodhicitta, right? And is what qualifies our teachings and our practice as a Mahayana practice, is that everything is motivated by this bodhicitta, this desire not to be helping myself, not to be free from samsara for my own benefit, but so that I might help others. And so in our practice, what we're trying to do is walk the path of Buddhas, right? We're trying to live as Buddhas live. And so we look at the Buddhas, the Tibetan word for Buddha. Tibetans have this way of when they translate things from the Sanskrit, they sometimes add in additional layers of meaning. So, the word Buddha comes from the Sanskrit root bud, which means to wake up, but it also means just to get up, to rise, to emerge. The Sanskrit, the Tibetan translation is Sangye. And so it carries that same connotation of the Sanskrit, but then they add onto it this aspect of sang means to purify. So the Buddhas have purified all of their defilements and all of their obscurations. And ge means to increase. So the Buddhas have perfectly completed all of their good qualities and increased all aspects of their wisdom. And so these two aspects of generating, they often say, we say the perfectly completed Buddhas, right? What are they completed? The completed, we say in pang tok, pang meaning what you abandon, tok meaning what you realize. So all of their abandonments and all of their realizations are perfectly complete. So that's what we need to try to do. So those two aspects of abandoning and realizing, what that comes down to in our everyday life is accumulating merit and abandoning non-virtuous activity, right? Or purifying non-virtuous activity, because we aren't able to abandon it all immediately because we're still samsaric beings doing our best, right? So accumulation and purification, these are two, like the two wings of a bird we need to push us forward on our path. And so what I wanted to talk about today, with that in mind, purification and accumulation being so important to us learning how to live like Buddhas, is I wanted to go over the 7-limb prayer. So, I should mention, I forgot to mention at the beginning. Today, the format's going to be a little bit different than usual. Usually, we have a little break for tea, but today I actually have to leave at 12:15. So we're not going to have a break today. What we'll do is we'll teach, we'll have meditation together, and then time for Q&A, and then we'll end a little bit early, and there'll be a tea break at the end instead of in the middle. So I hope that works out for everyone. But it just seems a little easier for our schedule today. Sorry, I forgot to mention that up top. So if you turn to page 35 of the prayer book, one of the prayers you recite is the 7-limb prayer, right? And now these 7 limbs and this type of prayer you see in so many of our practices, both in sutra and in tantra, okay? It's really, really important. Now, if you study the Lamrim, the practice of a 7-limb prayer comes at the beginning of your practice. It's considered one of the preliminary practices. Okay? So, especially if you read something, for instance, like Pabon Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, he talks about when you sit down to engage in Lamrim meditation, so all the different topics as taught by the Buddha in a sequential order. First, there's a whole process of sweeping your room, cleaning your space, setting up an altar, laying out water bowls, right? Doing all of these external activities. And then you offer verses of refuge and bodhicitta, and then you offer a 7-limb prayer. And that primes your mind to engage in meditation. So the 7-limb prayer, it encompasses all of our practice of purification and accumulation is included in the 7-limb prayer. And so you'll see much more extensive versions of this in different, within different prayers, right? So if you look at the King of Prayers, which is the prayer of good conduct, that is quite a long prayer. Well, not quite a long prayer, but a few hundred verses or so. And that within it, it has an extensive 7-limb prayer that's maybe like 4 or 5 verses for each of the 7 limbs. So what are the 7 limbs of the 7-limb prayer? I know some of you know. Sadhana, Diti. So wait, let's go. Wait. So first, what's the first limb? Prostration or homage. Yeah. So prostration. What's the second limb? Offer. Exactly. Offerings. So making offerings. Yeah. Well, don't worry about the specifics. Just the limb itself is the limb of prostration, then the limb of offerings, then
negative actions.
Right. So confession.
Confession.
Yeah. So confession is number 3.
Rejoicing.
Okay.
Please live
So then request and beseech. So requesting is requesting the teachings, and beseeching is requesting our teachers to live for a long time and to not pass away into parinirvana. These are often combined into one, but there are 2 separate things. And then the 7th
is to keep the teachings going.
So that's the 5th one is requesting, and then the 6th one is beseeching.
Turn the wheel of.
So that's requesting, and then requesting is the 5th one. That's requesting to continue teaching the Dharma, and then the 6th one, beseeching, is beseeching them, which this is another way of saying requesting them to live a long time and to not pass away into parinirvana. And then the 7th. Nope. That's number 6.
Can I take a peek?
Yeah, go ahead.
Dedicate my own medicine.
Dedicate. So dedication, right? Okay, dedication. There we go. Okay. So we have.
Venerable, we should have a competition. Oration competition.
We have prostration. We have offering. We have confession. We have rejoicing. And we have requesting, beseeching, and dedication. Those are the 7 limbs. Okay. And so those 7 limbs accompany a complete practice, right? And we'll talk about how each of those 7 limbs accompanies a full practice, and it leads either towards accumulation or purification or increasing the merit you've already accumulated, right? So that's how they work together. Now, in general, if we want to have a real complete practice, we should first start with refuge and bodhicitta, right? That's not included in the 7 limbs. Sometimes the verses of prostration will include verses of refuge mixed into it, but technically it's a separate practice. So if we really want a full practice, we first start with refuge and then bodhicitta and then the 7 limbs. So I thought that's what we talked about today. So first, the reason this comes at the beginning of all of our practice, of our meditation, isn't because it's simple. It isn't because it's a beginner's practice. It's because it's a foundational practice, right? It's because it is critical for all of whatever more advanced practices we want to do to have a basis of refuge, of bodhicitta, and then of accumulating merit and purifying negativities. If you don't build a secure foundation, right, then no matter how beautiful of a building you build on top of it, it's going to crumble. You need to have a secure foundation. So having a really strong mind of refuge is quite important, and a mind of bodhicitta. These are our foundation. And then these 7 limbs are what help secure that foundation to make it complete. Okay. And then when you engage in more advanced meditation practices or more advanced study or contemplation, you have a basis to build off of. So it's at the beginning, not because it's simple or because it's for beginners only, but it's at the beginning because it's critical for our practice. So refuge and bodhicitta, I won't talk too much about them today because we've talked about them a lot in the past, but since they are critical, I will mention them briefly. So refuge, as we know, is refuge in the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And a mind of refuge, a proper mind of refuge, is defined as a mind that... That's okay. That's okay. A mind of refuge is a mind that recognizes that the 3 jewels of refuge are sources of authentic refuge. And not only that, they are the only sources of authentic refuge. So there is no authentic refuge from samsara other than the 3 jewels. And so what does it mean to be a refuge from samsara, right? So we think of the worldly sense of refuge, somewhere that you can find safety, you can find protection. And that is the same meaning here, except instead of worldly protection, it's offering spiritual protection. It's offering salvation from all of the sufferings of samsara. So that's what the 3 jewels are providing us when we say refuge. right? And a mind of refuge is recognizing that if I really want to be free from suffering, I'm not going to find that safety in wealth or in family or in having nice things, or even becoming a monk. That is not going to give me the safety from samsara. What's going to give me safety is the teachings of the Buddha, right? So when we have these three jewels, the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, the real refuge is the Dharma jewel. The Buddha is the founder. The Buddha is the one that expressed the teachings for us to understand them. The Sangha are the community that uphold those teachings and guide us. They offer us support. But the actual teachings, the Dharma jewel, is the real refuge. The Dharma jewel is what's going to help us become free from suffering. The analogy that's usually given is if we think of the Buddha as a great physician, that's one of his terms, then the physician is who diagnoses the problem, right? So the Dharma is the medicine that's given. And the Sangha are the nurses that make sure you take the medicine correctly. Of those three, the one that's benefiting you the most is the actual medicine, right? But you need the doctor to help prescribe it and to diagnose your problem. And most of us are a little lazy, so we need the nurses to help us know how to do it correctly, right? But the medicine itself is most important. So the Dharma jewel is the real refuge, the most important of the three. But we go for refuge in all three of them because they all have a role to play in our spiritual journey. So in that way, refuge in the three jewels is a source of instruction and inspiration, instruction, and support. Right? So the Buddha is inspiration for our practice. The Dharma itself is the instruction, that is the actual practice. And the Sangha is the support that makes sure our practice is going in the right direction. Okay. So that when you take refuge and have genuine refuge, it relieves you of this fear of samsara, And one of the ways you know if your refuge is strong is you don't feel as overwhelmed by the fears of samsara. That isn't to say that you want to be here. And that isn't to say that you don't feel or experience the sufferings of samsara actively. But it's to say you aren't overwhelmed with a sense of fear that I am going to be stuck here forever, right? So when you actually have this confidence in the Dharma, it helps alleviate that fear. So you have confidence that even if I am still suffering, I'm pointed towards Buddhahood. I'm moving in the right direction. The Dharma is the perfect guide that will bring me out of suffering. So it builds our own confidence and it eliminates our fear, as well as offering us inspiration and guidance in the instructions of the teachings. So that's refuge in a nutshell. Okay. We could spend literally within the Foundation for the Mind, the FPMT, we can do a 4-week course just on refuge. So we're going to do the short version today, just that. So then after refuge, so refuge is the basis for of identifying yourself as a Buddhist, right? Having actual genuine refuge is what qualifies you to be, in Tibetan we'd say Nanta, an inner being, right? So refuge is what qualifies us to become a Buddhist or to be identified as a Buddhist. And then generating mind of bodhicitta is what then makes us practicing the Mahayana, the path of the Bodhisattvas. So that's why these two go together. And you see, even in our prayer that we recite, the very first prayer that we recited, the first two verses are verses of refuge. Then the second two verses are verses of generating bodhicitta, right? The 4-line prayer we recited, not verses, lines. Again, there are more elaborate versions of it. But so bodhicitta, as I mentioned, is this wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So it's a mind that has as its object, or as its observed object, the suffering of all sentient beings. And then with respect to those sentient beings, the desire to achieve perfect, complete Buddhahood. Not for your own benefit, not for your own relief of suffering, but so that you might relieve the suffering of others. Okay. So when we generate a mind of bodhicitta, even just a very a baby understanding of it, not even a really strong mind, but just the smallest taste of bodhicitta, what that does is that makes all of our activities beneficial. Any activity we do throughout the day, if we can make that actively combined with a mind of wishing to help others, right? So bodhicitta itself, you have to remember, comes from compassion. Compassion is one of the primary causes for bodhicitta. Compassion is the wish for others to be free from suffering, to be free from all the causes of suffering. So if we can actively generate these minds of compassion and bodhicitta, then even our worldly everyday activities become virtuous activities. They become beneficial activities, benefiting ourselves and others. So it transforms all of our activities into spiritual activities. So bodhicitta is transformative. It's the most transformative thought we can have. And it's incredibly radical, if you think about it. Because most people, most worldly advice is not to always be working for the benefit of others, is to work for yourself. Prioritize your own needs, right? That's most important. The idea that you could rearrange your mind so that I'm not focused on my own needs first, but on others. And even if I'm doing worldly activities, whatever it may be, I'm doing my regular job, which is a boring job with nothing to do on the outside for a spiritual activity, right? Even if I'm doing chores around the house, I'm dealing with traffic, whatever those activities may be. If we can actively create a mind of compassion and bodhicitta to accompany those practices, then they become spiritual activities that are pushing us forward on the path of Buddhahood and totally transform our way of experiencing the world, because it's no longer experience through what is happening to me. That's no longer the lens. We're instead experiencing it through a lens of how can I be helping others right now, right? And that simple shift in the way you perceive the world opens up your mind in really important ways, because you stop being the center of the world. So you no longer are the victim that's experiencing all of this pain, this suffering, this torment, this misery. Instead, you become the person who is able to relieve others, right? So you pull yourself out of your own ego in that way. And so by doing that, we're making the most of our human life, of this perfect human rebirth that we have. We're not wasting a single moment. So those are the two preliminary things to our 7-limb prayer. And then we get to the actual 7-limb prayer. And so, as I mentioned, each of these 7 limbs is accompanying us to some extent with either accumulating merit, purifying negative actions, or increasing the merit we've already accumulated. So the first is prostrations. Now, when we make prostrations, or we pay homage, we have prostrations of both of body, speech, and mind. Right? So there are physical prostrations, but the act of reciting verses of refuge and prostration is a prostration of speech. And then most important is the mental prostration. Right? So generally, when we're advised to do prostrations, we are advised to visualize ourselves. Well, first off, it's depending on the practice. But if you're doing, let's say, a Lamrim practice, you want to visualize in the space in front of you the Buddha, but not just the Buddha, all of the Buddhas that exist, the whole merit field. So the Buddha and all of your teachers and all of the lineage teachers as well. Ideally, you would have them all visualized in front of you. And if you aren't able to visualize all of them, then you visualize the Buddha, but the Buddha is inseparable from your own root teacher and inseparable from all of the other Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, all of the holy beings. So if you aren't actually able to visualize all of the separate beings in front of you, you visualize them all embodied in the Buddha. That's the merit field in that way. I was seeing if we had a photo of the merit field. I know we do somewhere, but that's okay. And then you visualize yourself. Oh, there it is. Yeah. That's the traditional Lamrim merit field or group. That's part of the group. Well, that's okay. So that's what you visualize in front. Now yourself, you visualize yourself and then all of your past lives as well. Now, ideally, you would visualize all of your past lives in whatever form they took, but that could be very difficult. So then you can visualize them all as if they were human beings. So in that way, you visualize yourself as like the leader of a large congregation of sentient beings. And so it's not just your mind, but it's all of the past lifetimes you've experienced as well. And then you want to visualize yourself as big as possible, right? Because at this point, your visualization is a body made of light, right? So it doesn't matter how big your body is or what obstacles you have with your body. And then when you do prostrations, you visualize yourself leading this whole congregation of individuals prostrating. And that makes the merit you accumulate more powerful, right? It's not simple saying, oh, I pay respect to you. It's this whole army of beings that is your mind stream in that concrete way. So when we do prostrations, right, you can do physical prostrations. You see what I do here is a half prostration or a semi-prostration, it's called, where you have 5 points of contact with the ground, your knees, your hands, and your forehead. The full prostration is when you lay flat all the way down. And ideally, they say that for every atom of ground that your body covers, you accumulate more merit. So part of the reason you visualize yourself to be the size of a building is because then you accumulate the merit as if you were a giant. Now, some of this, a lot of these things sound like superstition, right? And especially when you're new to the practice, it can feel like you're being asked to believe things that you have no way of proving that's true. And I'll be honest, I don't know how much merit is accumulated if I visualize myself bigger or smaller. I don't have any insight into that. I know what my teachers have told me. I have confidence in my teachers and in the teachings due to my experience with them, right? So my confidence isn't blind faith. It's based on my reasoning and my experience. But I can't actually say like, oh, I've accumulated more merit because my visualization was bigger. What I do know is by doing these practices, it changes my mind, right? And I can guarantee that because I have experience of it. So I can't tell you the mathematics or the calculus of how much merit I've accumulated, okay? But I can tell you that my mind has changed by engaging in these more active practices. And so this expansive visualization, this does something to my mind. I can guarantee you that, okay? So it's useful for that alone. And the other aspects of it, believing in the merit you accumulate and so forth, the more you practice and you find teachers that you connect with, then you can have confidence that these teachings are valid in that way. When we prostrate, in the Tibetan tradition, we don't put our hands flat together, okay? We want to keep our thumbs tucked into our hands like this. And that way our hands aren't empty and our hands resemble a wish-fulfilling gem. So our active prostration is like offering wish-fulfilling gems to all Buddhas, okay? And that way your prostration itself isn't an empty practice. Now, what do we generate in terms of our mind when we prostrate? It's not simply that we generate a mind of humility, though there is that, right? So generating a mind of humility is part of prostrating, right? It's recognizing that the teachers in front of us, as well as the Buddhist and Bodhisattvas, have levels of realization that we don't have, and therefore we can benefit from their advice, their guidance, their instruction. And so we humble ourselves in that way, not to beat up on ourselves, but just to recognize there's something we have to learn here, right? So it does generate a mind of humility, but that is not the only thing that the practice does. What the practice does is as we prostrate, we purify negative actions we've accumulated with response to, or we purify negative actions we've done in regards to the Buddhists and the Bodhisattvas, right? So in response to the Buddhists and Bodhisattvas, since we're paying homage to them, negative karma we've created in relation to them is purified. And when we prostrate we have the 4 points of the body that we touch, right? So in the crown of our head is recognizing our guru, our forehead, which is the body, speech, and mind, right? So we say the three vajras, or three holy places. So we're purifying our actions of body, and we are creating the causes to generate the bodies of a Buddha when we prostrate and we touch our hands to our forehead, as well as the top of our head. We purify actions of speech, and we create the conditions to have the speech of a Buddha, the melodious sound of 60 beautiful melodies that they say at the Buddhist speeches, when we prostrate with our hand to our throat, and then to our heart. We purify the mind. And so we create the seeds to develop the omniscient mind of a Buddha and the perfect, complete compassion of a Buddha, and bodhicitta of a Buddha, right? So those actions aren't meaningless. What we're doing is creating the causes to achieve the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, and we purify negative actions we've done in relation to our body, our speech, and our mind. So the action of prostration is incredibly powerful in that way. And what our teachers say, it's more important that our prostrations are quality, not quantity, right? So there's a very common practice in all the Tibetan traditions to do the preliminary practice of offering 100,000 prostrations. Very, very common. It's called a nindro, right? And in all the four Tibetan traditions, offering prostrations is one of the nindro practices. And our teachers say, if you think the goal is to do 100,000 prostrations and then you're done with it, then you haven't understood the point of prostrations, okay? Prostrations are part of your practice every day for the rest of your life. And more important than the number you do is the quality that you do, so that you have a correct mind that is recognizing and visualizing the Buddhas in front, that's visualizing yourself however you're able to, and is engaging in the activity with pure faith and with a strong mind of refuge. no matter how much we study and how much we meditate, if we don't have the merit, if we haven't created the causes, that meditation and that study won't bear any fruit. We have to create the causes for that fruit to actually ripen. And so the worldly causes is actually engaging in the practice. It's doing the work, right? We have to do the work. But the spiritual causes is we have to accumulate the merit that allows us the opportunity to have realizations. And so prostration is the start of that, right? What we're doing is we are generating minds of humility, but also respect. And we are eliminating minds of pride. We are preparing our mind to receive instruction and teaching, right? So these all happen in the practice of prostration. And if we think about part of my goal with our class today is to think of how we don't only do this at the beginning of our practice, our meditation section, but how we can bring it into our everyday life, right? So if the point of prostration is to generate a mind of respect and humility and a mind that is open to receiving instruction, throughout our day, whenever you see anything that is a symbolic representation of a holy object, you can make prostration. You don't have to do the whole physical prostration. You can make a mental prostration, right? Whenever you see any being helping another being, you can recognize that as a holy action that is a representation of the Dharma, even if they're not a Buddhist, even if it's not a perfect action. And you can say that is a Dharmic activity, right? And it's a representation of all the teachings of the Buddha, right? And so you can generate this mind of respect and humility all day long. And that will help you stay balanced in your day. It'll help your mind not focus on itself, not make itself the priority in every situation. So constantly generating a mind of homage, we say, or prostration, is going to allow you to focus on others more fully. So it accompanies your act of bodhicitta, your mind of bodhicitta, to make it more robust.
A similar practice could be to send metta to all the beings you come across. But suppose you walk to the street, you see people on the road, you just send metta to them, mentally. So that's another way of doing it, isn't it?
Well, that one is a little different. So metta is compassion. That's the translation of the word compassion, right? So if you're developing a mind of bodhicitta, which itself is motivated by compassion, then you should be doing that all the time. So what metta really is, the way we define it, is the wish for others to be free from suffering and all the causes of suffering. So you definitely should be doing your best to send that aspirational wish towards all sentient beings you encounter, and then letting that guide how you act in those circumstances. That's true. But then on top of that, the idea of prostrating is that you're not prostrating to every being, right? But whenever you see a holy object or representation of a holy object, you're using that as an opportunity to humble yourself and to generate a mind of respect for the three jewels and for the three objects of refuge at the same time. So it's not separate from metta. It's an additional practice that is making your practice of compassion more powerful, or it's accompanying it in that way. They work together. All of these practices work together with each other. They're like a symbiotic practice. Individually, they're all going to be benefiting us, but then when you combine them, they're also more powerful. So that's the action of prostration. It's also important to know that the most important prostration, obviously, is the mental prostration. So if due to your physical situation, you aren't able to do physical prostrations, that doesn't mean you can't do prostrations, right? If you are able to do physical prostrations, even semi-prostrations like I was doing, or some sort of abbreviated prostration, then that is beneficial. But if you aren't able to, mental ones are more important. I will say, knowing my teachers, seeing them, for them, prostrating is the most critical thing they do, right? When I was at the center in Boston, our teacher, who was there when I first started, Geshe Tsoga, whenever you see a holy object, you should do prostration. So you should walk into this room, and we're surrounded by Buddhists, right? All of these holy objects. The first thing you should do walking through that door isn't to say hi to whoever's in here making tea. It isn't to, put your bag down. It's to realize you're in the presence of countless Buddhists and visual representations of all three jewels of refuge. So you should immediately prostrate. Immediately prostrate. Now, that could be physical prostrations. Many people, as soon as they walk into any temple, will immediately do physical prostrations. But at the very least, take a moment to recognize you're surrounded by Buddhists, right? The visual representations of Buddhists. And so you could have a mind of prostration right away. Okay. So our teacher, Geshe Tsogo, whenever he came into our gompa, immediately he'd walk in and his first thing, his face would light up immediately. And it wasn't a performance, it was genuine, his mind of prostration. And then a few months after I started at that center, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. And he lived for about 2 years with liver cancer, taking traditional Tibetan medicine. He'd go to Western doctors and get like all the scans and blood work done and send it to a doctor in Dharamsala who would then tell him what Tibetan medicine to do. And he was teaching right up until the end of his life. And by the end, he was very, very frail, right? His body had eaten itself away. And he would still do physical prostrations. He would come in front of the whole student body and it would take him 5 minutes, 6, 7, 10, 8 minutes to do 3 prostrations, but he would always do them, right? Because for him, the fact that if he was going to get up on a throne and teach Dharma in any way, he had to humble himself before the teachings of the Buddha, before he could even imagine doing that. And even though it pained his body to do it, as long as he had the energy to do it, he was going to do it. And at the very end of his life, he wasn't moving, so he was doing mental prostrations. But up until then, as long as he could, he would do physical prostrations. And for all the students there, I can't tell you how much faith that generated in us and confidence in him as a teacher, but in the teachings themselves, to see him pushing his frail body to do prostrations in that way. So they can be very powerful for yourself and for others to do prostrations. Same with Kapjala Rinpoche. After he showed the aspect of having a stroke for a while, he had a lot of mobility problems. But then the last years of his life, his mobility was much better, but still it wasn't perfect. And yet he'd always do full body prostrations before teaching. He did them here in Bangalore, at every teaching he attended, full body prostrations. Every time, because it was so critical. And so when you see your teachers doing that, it's easy for someone like me who's been practicing for a few decades to think that, I've made some progress. I've done something with my spiritual progress. And then you see your teachers humble themselves without a moment's hesitancy. And I realize, oh, my ego still has a long way to go. So for me, that's very motivational to see my teachers in that way. So prostrations help us to destroy our ego and to generate respect for the 3 tools. So next, in the 7 limbs, is the limb of offering, right? So making offerings, it helps purify any negativities we've accumulated with regard to miserliness, with regard to theft, or any other negative actions that have to do with taking things that don't belong to us or hoarding things. So any negativities we created in that regard, we help purify them through the act of offering. And it creates the conditions for our own future wealth and abundance, right? Giving itself, when we've talked about the 6 perfections, the first one being the perfection of generosity, is a mental act. Of course, the physical giving is the consequence of the mental act of giving. But we do say that there are 4 ways in general, at least during the 7 limb prayer, to make offerings. So the first is the offering of all beautiful objects that please all of the 5 senses, right? And these don't have to be objects you own. They can be objects, when you see a beautiful bouquet of flowers or a beautiful flower growing from the street or in a garden, you can offer those beautiful flowers. You don't have to go pick them and put them on an altar. That's not what it means. When you, a few years ago when I traveled to Mung Tawang, beautiful snowy mountains, and you see the beautiful vista landscape, and it's gorgeous. It looks like a Pure Land. So you offer that Pure Land to the Buddhists. And then even in our prayer here, it says, I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. So you don't only offer the things you can see and experience, you visualize countless offerings, right, to make to the Buddhas. So the first one is offer all beautiful objects and objects that please all of the 5 senses. But then you make the offering of upholding the Dharma. That is another type of offering you make, of actually engaging in Dharma practice. This means studying, it means reciting, it means memorizing, it means meditating, it means taking your studies and putting them into practice. That's what it means. That is a type of offering. And you offer the mind that develops bodhicitta. So your activities of practicing compassion And bodhicitta is an offering as well. And then finally, you imagine that all of the virtue you've accumulated, all of your own roots of virtue, all of the merit, you offer that as well. That transforms into pleasant objects that are offered. So in these 4 ways, you're making offerings to all the Buddhas. Now, we did a mandala offering at the beginning of the session today. And as I said, there's a longer mandala verses, and there's a whole elaborate process of making a mandala offering that you can do. I don't think we have any mandalas on display here, but
It's inside.
That's okay. Oh, it's behind here. There's a whole practice of making a mandala offering that you could do a much more elaborate version of. And maybe at some point we could have a commentary on that here at the center. But by doing that practice, whether visually or physically, you are helping create proper conditions to achieve the right view of the nature of reality, because you are purifying the world around you when you offer it, right? You're not offering, a gutter filled with dirt and garbage, right? So if you're offering the whole world system to the Buddhists, you have to purify it, right? This comes into even our tantric practice, where we visualize the world around us as if it were a Buddha field, not just our worldly experience, but we purify it through our visualization and then offer it.
Then there is a question.
Okay.
Prakash,
Yeah.
they're asking, please ask your question. Okay. I have a lot of fear for the future. What should I do?
We all have a lot of fear for the future. The best we can do with our fear is first, from a worldly sense, look at it and we say, how is this fear benefiting us? Okay. Because in Buddhism, we talk about healthy fear, right? Healthy fear of the lower realms is what encourages us to take refuge, what encourages us to practice Dharma, right? We have to look at these emotions and say, is this encouraging me to engage in spiritual practice, or is this holding me back? Is this causing me to have paralysis, causing me not to move forward? So if we have a lot of fear, first look at that fear and say, what is this fear founded in? Is it founded in reality, or is it founded in my experience of reality, my presuppositions about reality? And then, so that's the first thing. Is this a genuine fear, or is this an exaggeration, right? Most of our fears are us exaggerating what's going to happen around us. But then if it is a genuine fear, then you say, okay, what is this fear doing? Is this motivating me to act in a virtuous way, or is it not motivating me? And if it's not motivating you, you say, well, what is the benefit to it? If all it's doing is causing me anxiety, causing me not to want to engage in virtuous activity, how is it helping me? So then when you realize that, then you say, okay, what can I do to help alleviate this fear? So it may be some worldly things, depending on what the fear is. You may be able to take some worldly actions that will help you. But aside from that, then you have to then look at your mind of refuge and say, if I have refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that is going to free me from all suffering. And any of this suffering that I may experience, that I have a fear of experiencing, is only temporary worldly suffering, right? I have suffered through samsara countless times, again and again and again, in circumstances that were much more difficult than these. And yet now here I am as a human being with the opportunity to practice a spiritual path. And so instead of letting this fear hold me back, I'm going to let this fear motivate me to engage more fervently in my practice, to develop even more compassion, to work harder to benefit others, because I don't know how long I'm going to have that opportunity. So you have to analyze the fear, see, is the fear based in reality or in an exaggeration of reality? And then once you've exhausted any actual practical worldly things you can do to prevent that fear from coming about, then you allow that fear to motivate you to engage in deeper and more meaningful practice. Because if the fear is only holding back your practice, then what's the benefit, right? And then depending on what the fear is of, there are different practices you can do to help counteract it or counterbalance it. So it depends on what the specific fear is that you have, So you might find a practice that is kind of offers the opposite of that fear. So there are many different fears we can have. But it is also depending on the amount of, depending on the type of practice you engage in, there are specific Buddhas that we pray to help us eliminate all of our fears. So the medicine Buddhas, as well as Tara, the female embodiment of compassion, these Buddhas are known to help alleviate our fears, right? That's one of the promises they made before they become Buddhas, is that when I'm a Buddha, I will work to eliminate the fears of all sentient beings. And so sometimes generating minds of devotion to those specific Buddhas, reciting their names, reciting their mantras, meditating on their form like that can help also alleviate your fears, because they have dedicated themselves to helping alleviate fears of sentient beings. But ultimately, they can't take it away from you, right? None of the Buddhists can. They can't take your fears away from you just by like blessing you. You have to do the work on your own, but they can be useful aids. So sometimes having devotion to and practices based on either the medicine Buddhas or Tara are known to help eliminate fear as well. So continuing just to wrap up the idea of offering, our second limb. So as I said, offering, it creates the conditions for you to develop abundance and wealth. Again, not for your own benefit, so that you might be able to use it to benefit others. It helps purify any negativities that you have accumulated with regard to miserliness, theft, or hoarding, and things like this. And it's something you can offer to the Buddhas all the time. So as you're going through your day, whenever you see something that is pleasant, you can offer it to the Buddhas, right? Whenever you have any pleasurable experience, you can offer it to all sentient beings and to the Buddhas. So similar to prostration, what this does by focusing on this in your everyday life is, again, it helps you take yourself out of the center of attention. So much of our practice is about relocating ourself from being the center of attention, because all of our negative minds are based on our self-cherishing, which itself comes from our self-grasping, our misunderstanding of the nature of reality, right? And so anything we can do to eliminate our self-grasping mind and our self-cherishing mind is going to push us closer towards actual genuine happiness and contentment, because it's moving us towards Buddha. So whenever you see something beautiful, instead of saying, oh, that's such a beautiful thing, you say, that's such a beautiful thing, I offer it to all sentient beings. I offer it to all the Buddhas. So you can make an offering of all of the pleasurable experiences you have throughout the day. Okay. Moving on to the third limb. The third limb is what, Deepti? Confession, right? So we are confessing all of the negative actions we've done in this life and in all past lives. Now, when you're sitting down to do a practice, you confess all the negative actions you can remember doing, but then all the actions you don't remember doing as well, in this life and in all past lives. And, those of us who have studied the 4 opponent powers, the way to purify a confession, the way to purify negative action, just simply saying, oh, I did this wrong thing, that's not enough, right? Recognizing that you've committed harmful actions, and then generating a mind of regret. So a mind that realizes that those actions are harmful to yourself and others, right? An actual mind that regrets engaging in those actions. So that mind of regret is usually accompanied by either shame or embarrassment. And the way we define those is, shame is recognizing you've committed a harmful action and feeling bad about it when you're on your own, right? And embarrassment is when you're with others, when you commit a negative action in front of others. Most important, though, is none of those, regret, shame, embarrassment, have nothing to do with guilt, right? So it's not the idea that I'm a bad person because I've done this harmful action. That's not what we're going for. Shame and embarrassment and regret should be motivating you to engage in virtue. They shouldn't be making you feel bad about yourself. So if you're beating yourself up, saying, what a loser I am, I'm such a bad person, all I do is negativity, that is not a useful mind, right? Similar to what I was saying about the fear. If that emotion is not helping you move forward on your path of practice, then it's not beneficial. So at least guilt, feeling guilty as we understand it, isn't useful in that way. Regret is useful. And shame and embarrassment, as we define them, are useful because they recognize harmful actions and encourage you not to repeat them, right? But that's nothing about you, right? That's important. That's really important to remind yourselves. I'm not a bad person because I engage in harmful actions. I engage in harmful actions because I am a suffering sentient being doing my best. And when I realize that I do it, then I do my best to not do it again in the future, right? So if we don't purify our negative actions, all we've done is create more obstacles for our future happiness, right? That's all negative actions do. Negative actions create obstacles for our happiness in this life and for our happiness in future lives. So by purifying them, what we're doing is getting rid of the roadblocks that are getting in our way, okay? When you purify negative actions and when you engage in the act of confession and generate a mind of regret, Pabonka says that it can be of different strengths. So if your mind of regret is really quick and really strong and your action of confession is really powerful, then you purify that negative action right to the root. You completely purify it. Or you might lessen its eventual fruit, right? So you still have created this negativity, but it's not as heavy anymore. Or you at least have stopped that negativity from growing, right? Because negative actions will expand, right? The result can be disproportionate to the cause. So by immediately generating mind of regret, at the very least, you're stopping that negative action from getting bigger or getting heavier. The story that I mentioned this earlier before class, but there's a story of Lama Atisha when he was in Tibet that, he's a great teacher, right? Obviously, incredible scholar, incredible practitioner. And so we look at him and we think this is a holy being. But he had such a mind of regret that whenever he noticed he engaged in any harmful action, which would be a harmful action of mind for him, right? He wasn't engaging in harmful actions of body or speech. But whenever he had a brief moment of anger or a brief moment of frustration or any of these things, he'd immediately stop whatever he was doing. If he was riding a horse, he'd get off of his horse. Whatever he was doing, he'd immediately confess, he'd immediately do prostrations and other actions to help purify it immediately. He wouldn't wait to the end of the day, So we're advised to do a purification process every day in the evening to help purify whatever negative actions we've accumulated that day. But by including confession in our seven limb practice, that's what makes our practice so strong for purification, right? Because as I mentioned, the seven limbs are our entire practice of accumulation and purification, which is what we need to parallel our life as a Buddha, where we abandon all of our afflictions and we accumulate all good qualities, right? So confession is critical for that. They say if you aren't willing to confess your negative actions, or not even not willing, if you don't think it's important to confess negative actions and to generate a mind of regret regarding negative actions, then it means you don't understand karma. You don't understand the law of cause and effect, right?
Bhandaji, the confession is made to oneself, is it? Or
you confess to all the Buddhas in the you can confess to another monk if you want to, or a nun, but in general, you're really confessing to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Right?
In your mind.
Yeah, in your mind. Yeah. Well, there are prayers you can recite as well. So you'd be using your speech to confess. It makes it more powerful. But the confession itself is a mental practice in general. You can confess, especially if you've done a really negative action or a really harmful, heavy negative action. It can be helpful to confess to a monk or a nun, especially when or your teacher, if you have faith in them, that can be helpful to you because it makes you take more responsibility for it. It's easy to say, I'm going to confess to all the Buddhas, because in the Buddhas, you don't have to look them in the face when you confess to them, right? They're not sitting in the space in front of you. To confess to another human being, it really requires a strong mind of regret, right? And so it can help make your mind of regret stronger to confess to another human being in that way, right? But it's not required. What's most important is that you develop this strong mind of regret. That's the most important part of the confession. And you're confessing to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are not judging you, right? There's no judgment. No one's saying, oh, you're such a bad person. They're just, the confession isn't for the purpose of the person receiving the confession, right? It's for you, right? We spend so much of our time in the world engaging in or creating negative karma. We don't think about it just because it's so easy to create negative karma, to have negative minds come up, right? And we don't think about it. We do it all day long. And most of us aren't as in tune with our own minds as a teacher, so we don't realize whenever we've done it. So it's important, even if we don't recognize the negative karma we're creating, to purify it, to confess it, say, you know what? I know that throughout the day today, I've been doing my best, and I don't remember having a negative mind towards someone, but the likelihood of me having a mind of jealousy or of avarice or of frustration or of any of these harmful minds, or of me seeing someone I don't like being denied something and having a little bit of joy in their suffering, the likelihood of that happening is probably pretty big, right? even if I don't remember doing it, and even if it wasn't very strong, I probably did it today. Even a small thing like that. So we confess
A
that.
good way of doing it is like having a review of the day in your mind, maybe at the end of the day, and then you try and identify the negative thing you've done or thought, and then for each of them, it can take a minute or two to do that. You review the day from morning to evening.
If you've people who've attended a lot of my classes before, that's one of the primary practices I encourage is in the evening. The reason, most of us, we find time to meditate in the morning. That's most common. People meditate in the morning, but I find it really important to meditate in the evening as well. And for this specific reason, to review your day, to say how much of my day has been passed in spiritual activity and how much has it been passed in worldly activity, right? And we have examples from some of the teachers in Tibet, such as Geshe Ben Kunga, who would do a visualization, and this is specifically where we learn about this, talking about the 8 worldly concerns, where he would go through all of his activities of the day, and for everything he had done that was motivated by a worldly concern, so a concern seeking his own pleasure, his own goal, his own gain, his own fame or popularity, or his own compliments, his own praise, or trying to avoid his own suffering or loss and so forth. Any action he did motivated by a worldly concern, he would place a black stone. And anything by a virtuous or a Dharma concern, he'd place a white stone. And at the beginning of his practice, he said there's a mountain of black stones and no white stones. But the more he did that practice, when you do that practice every day, what it helps you do is then during your day, you become more equipped to like, oh, wait, this is something that I had to generate regret for this yesterday. So I shouldn't do it today, right? So by doing that practice in the evening every day, it makes you engage in less harmful activity during the day because you become more aware of it, because you're reminding yourself of it. So that is a very powerful practice. It's one that we recommend quite a lot. So, they say sometimes the act of confession or generating regret and engaging in purification is that, and this is kind of it feels contradictory, but sometimes negative karma you've accumulated, you'll experience it now instead of in the future as a result of generating mind of regret. You weaken that negative karma to the point where you experience it now. So sometimes the stronger your practice is, the more difficulties you experience. Because what you've done is you've decreased those negative karmic imprints to the point where you can experience them as a human as opposed to something else. So one of the examples they give is a monk who was incredibly strong in his practice, and then he experienced incredibly difficult circumstances, right? His living standards went down quite a lot because his benefactors left and his living standards had to decrease. But what was happening was he had created the negative karma to be reborn as a hungry ghost. And he purified that to such an extent that he was no longer going to be reborn as a hungry ghost, but then it ripened in this lifetime as him not having complete resources. So that can happen to us, right? And so it feels contradictory because the more you practice, you experience more difficulties, right? It can feel that way sometimes. But what's happening often is that if your practice is strong enough, very, very heavy negative karmas have been reduced to such an extent, and your practice has evolved to such an extent that you can deal with those difficulties in a healthy and meaningful way. So they ripen now because you've created conditions for those weaker karmas to ripen. So sometimes the act of confession and the act of generating regret can seem like it's inviting more difficulties. But when you experience difficulties for that reason, you should rejoice because it's the purification of negative karma and it's preventing it from ripening in the future when it could ripen in a more outrageous kind of way. This is why being able to meditate on joy when you experience sickness is really powerful. When you experience illness or any sort of physical discomfort, being able to use that as an opportunity to be joyful for the expiation, the removal of negative karma is really powerful practice. That's not to say that you should seek out physical discomfort or that you should seek out illness. It's going to come to you no matter what. We don't have to seek it out. But when you experience it, instead of saying, woe is me, how does this always happen to me? It's not fair. You say, this could be a lot worse. This could be me being reborn in much more difficult circumstances. But right now I have a Dharma mind that is allowing me to navigate this. And yes, it may be painful. It may be distressing. It may even be leading to my death if it's a heavy illness, right? But I have a spiritual practice right now that keeps my mind buoyant, which I may not have in the future. So I'm happy that this is happening now as opposed to in an uncontrolled state in the future. That mind, when you're able to do that, it doesn't get rid of your sickness, right? Your sickness is still there, but it makes it much less distressing So it alleviates your mental suffering in a huge way, you know? And as bad as physical suffering can be, the mental suffering is far worse, you know, far worse. I know I brought this up before, but when my mother was in the dying process last year, she developed breast cancer and it moved very quickly, right? So she had done, had a mammogram and they said she had no cancer. And then 6 months later, she had stage 4 cancer. So very, very quickly, she got cancer or her cancer spread. And then in less than a year, she went from being generally healthy, but having cancer to being almost unable to move, right? And being in a lot of pain. And the whole time, she was just angry that the doctors didn't find it faster. And she felt that she was a victim because she had to have been lied to for it to have moved as quickly as it did. And these were the minds that were occupying her. And it was awful to see because her physical suffering is bad enough, right? We could help some of that with medicine and with painkillers and these things. But she was creating so much more suffering for herself by putting all the blame on others and saying, how is this happening to me? I want to be alive for another 10 years. I want to spend time with my grandkids. She was doing all these mental suffering that she was creating for herself. And, my sister's a social worker. I'm obviously a monk. We know healthy ways to deal with it, but she didn't want to hear it from us, So it wasn't our place to help her. As much as I've done practice and training and I've done hospice care work, I couldn't do anything to help her because she wasn't in a place where I could help her. So all I could do was model what I thought was healthy behavior and model a mind that wasn't overwhelmed with regret or anger. And then take care of her physical needs as best as possible. But I was able to observe in the flesh what happens when your mind creates more suffering than your body. So as terrible as her physical illness was, her mental suffering was so much worse, and it entirely could have been avoided, right? And so obviously I couldn't remove it from her, but it is inspiration for me to realize how important it is that whenever I experience physical suffering, I don't let that create mental suffering for myself. So being able to observe it is useful. Even more important is also observing people who don't have it. So like I said, my teacher at the Geshe, who was sick, he had no mental suffering at all. He lived with a really debilitating cancer for 2 years. There wasn't a moment where that upset his mind. He said, this is the way it is. This is the karma I created. Now it's ripening. That's okay. I still have the ability to teach. I still have the ability to do prostrations. I still have the ability to study Dharma. That's what's most important. And seeing that is inspiring. So you realize that most of our suffering we create for ourselves. Our physical suffering is the ripening of karma we did create in the past, but we can't avoid most of it. What we can avoid is making it worse, right? And so the act of confession and the act of generating joyful minds when we experience difficulties, because we recognize it as the ripening of karma, is a way to alleviate that mental suffering or prevent that mental suffering. Okay. Let me try to move a little more quickly, because as we mentioned, we're end a little early today, 12:15. So moving on, the next of the 7 limbs is rejoicing, right? This is the most powerful practice. What is rejoicing? Rejoicing is generating a mind of joy that takes joy in virtue, right? It is a mind that sees the results of positive karma and it sees the actions that create positive karma both, and is experiences happiness and joy as a result of that. Okay. So what that does is whenever you see virtue, either a virtuous activity or the result of a virtuous activity, so someone experiencing their own happiness, right? Experiencing beneficial karma ripening. When you see that and it generates a mind of joy in you, what you're doing is you are aligning your mind to be familiar with virtue. You're saying virtue is becoming more indistinct from my mind. So it becomes more attractive, the idea of virtue. The idea of ever being separated from virtue becomes anathema to the way you live in the world, right? And especially when you're able to rejoice in others' in others' good deeds, that helps eliminate jealousy. It helps eliminate minds of spitefulness, right? It's especially powerful. We say we should rejoice in all the holy actions of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and of all ordinary and extraordinary beings. That includes all beings who are your friends and family, also those who you don't know, and also those who may be your enemies or you have an antagonistic relationship with. So if there's someone that you may have some sort of antagonistic relationship with, but they engage in a virtuous activity, rejoicing in their virtue. Or if they, get a promotion or win the lottery, something good happens to them. That's the result of some positive karma ripening. So they must have created the cause for that. Rejoicing in your enemy's good fortune is really powerful. It's hard to do, right? But it's really, really powerful because it eliminates jealousy, it eliminates spite, it eliminates this small-minded way of being in the world. But we also rejoice in our own virtue. So we can rejoice in, we say, our past virtues, we can rejoice in. The way we rejoice in the past virtues is by looking at our current circumstances. Anytime something pleasurable happens to us, it's because we created the causes for that, right? So we can look at our lives and I know we have a lot of external noise. We can look at our lives and our experiences, and any of those things that we experience as pleasurable, that's the result of past virtuous activity. So we can say, I did something right. Even having this human body is an indication that I did something right. So we can rejoice in our past virtue in that way. And then we analyze our activities, and that's how we develop a mind of rejoicing in our current virtue. So we both rejoice in our past virtue and our currently active virtue in that way. And so when we rejoice in virtue, so what are the actions that we want to rejoice in? Any of an action that is in line with the Dharma, right? So any action, whether it be an action of recitation or generosity or meditation or study or practice, whether it be an action of compassion, any of the actions that line up with the path of the teachings of the Buddha, that is something we should rejoice in, right? Even if they're not perfect, right? It's very hard for us to do perfect actions all the time. But if we're doing our best, that's something to rejoice in. It helps eliminate our arrogance, right? Because it's not about us, it's about the action itself. And then, of course, as I said, rejoicing over others' virtues is really powerful. Our teachers say that rejoicing is and not just our teachers, the Buddhists say, that rejoicing in others' virtue is like the most important practice and also kind of the lazy man's practice to get to Buddhahood. And so the sutra that they give an example of is there is a beggar who saw a king making offerings to all the Sangha that was there. And this beggar wasn't receiving any offerings, but he just witnessed it. And he generated a great mind of rejoicing at all of the merit this king was accumulating by offering food to all of the monks and nuns. And that beggar then accumulated the same amount of merit as that king, right? So the act of rejoicing, they say, if you rejoice in the activities of others and they have a greater spiritual practice than yours, you receive half the merit they accumulate. If their spiritual development is the equivalent of yours, you receive the exact same merit just through your act of rejoicing. And if they are less spiritually developed than you, you receive double the merit. So you actually don't even have to leave your room. You just sit there and you can rejoice in others' activity, right? So that's what they say, it's the lazy man's way to Buddhahood.
There's an echo.
There's an echo.
Echo.
Is someone's...
Tracking the teaching.
I see.
So we're hearing it twice. Then disturbing.
Sorry, okay. If we can try to eliminate that, that'd be helpful. But so rejoicing, again, I can't, I don't understand merit calculus. I can't guarantee you how that's going to work. But I know that those teachings come from the Buddha himself. There are examples of it in the sutras that are the teachings and the words of the Buddha, not just our teachers. Okay. And the reason for it is when you engage in a mind of rejoicing, what you are doing is you are aligning your mind with virtue. You're making virtue easier. You are making yourself accustomed to virtuous activity, whether it be your own or others. So it brings you closer to virtue. And then in so doing, farther away from non-virtue. So rejoicing is really powerful. And again, it's a mental act. So as you go about your day, you can be rejoicing every time you see someone experience anything that's beneficial to them, right? You can rejoice in that, especially if they're people who you have an antagonistic relationship with. You can rejoice in anytime they achieve something, right?
I think how is appreciation different from rejoicing? Isn't it like almost the same?
What do you mean by appreciation?
Appreciating the good in others, or appreciating the beauty of just suppose a garden, or the weather, for instance. You're not, for example, it's very easy to complain about the weather or the traffic. We do that habitually, but instead of doing that, to appreciate something, so then you're automatically drawn to the good and appreciating the, someone does something good or is looking nice or is, behaving well or has written a nice article or something. So appreciating that, isn't that like similar to rejoicing?
I think it's similar. Appreciation, at least the examples you gave, I think some of them would be similar to rejoicing, but not all of them. I think that kind of appreciation, especially many of the examples, seem to be similar to developing a mind of contentment. That a mind that isn't disturbed by external phenomena, but when you see positive external phenomena, you allow it to be joyful to you, but it doesn't overwhelm your senses. So no, regardless of what the circumstances are, you allow that to generate joy in you. But other times, some of your examples did line up with rejoicing. The important part of rejoicing is you're rejoicing in virtue and in the results of virtue. So that's the important part. And so if you're just saying, oh, good for him, he won the lottery, that in and of itself isn't enough. But if you're saying he created the karma, he engaged in the virtuous activities that allowed him to create the positive karma that would exist for him to receive this wealth, that is what you're rejoicing in, and that's where you're finding joy. So the joy isn't in the wealth he received, it's in the karma he created to receive that wealth, right? So in the same, if you go out and you see someone writes a really good newsletter or a good article, you're not rejoicing in the thing itself, but in the virtue that's created as a result of it. So it's a little bit different, but very, very similar. That mind of appreciation, I was trying to think of what the word for appreciation is in Tibetan, and I can't think of it. I don't know if I've heard the Tibetans say it. So it's usually, I think, included in other things. So a mind of appreciation is useful, right? Because you're not taking anything for granted. So I agree that a mind of appreciation, I think it overlaps with rejoicing to some extent. The heart of rejoicing is that you're rejoicing in virtue. That's the most important thing, not just the nice things. And if you're not careful, then you could just be appreciating external things, but thinking that the goodness or the happiness or the joy lies in those external things. And that is the knife's edge you're walking. As long as you're doing it with the right mind, then there's no concern. But, you have to be careful. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Of course, the day that I need to leave 15 minutes early, I'm running late. So for those who weren't here at the very beginning, we're not going to have a break today. I have to leave at 12:15. And so we are going to go, and then I was planning on starting meditation now, but we'll get there. And then we'll do a little time for Q&A at the end. And then we'll have tea and snack break at 12:15 instead of in the middle. Okay. So the next is requesting and beseeching. Those are 5 and 6. And these often are done together. And here they're done in the opposite order, right? Here, first you have beseeching and then requesting. So in general, the important thing is one of them is requesting the teachers and all the Buddhas to not show the signs of passing into parinirvana, but to continue to exist in samsara for as long as possible. And then you're requesting them to continue to teach the Dharma through their actions and through their speech. So technically, when we say requesting, that is requesting them to turn the wheel of Dharma, to continue teaching. And beseeching is requesting them to stay for a long time and to not show the aspect of passing away into parinirvana. Now, often those are combined. And what those are doing is, teachers teach independence on the needs of the students, okay? So when you are requesting the teachers to remain and to teach, what you're doing is you are creating the conditions for the teachings to prosper and for the teachings to thrive. If there aren't students requesting teachings, there won't be any teachings, okay? The Buddha himself didn't teach for 7 weeks after he achieved enlightenment. And the only reason he did teach is because Brahma requested him to, finally. At least that's the way the story goes, that Brahma requested it. And so finally, he agreed to Brahma's demands, all right? And that is the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, is when he taught the 4 truths to the 5 ascetics who he had been practicing ascetic practices with, right? Who had turned their back on him when he went and bathed in the river and cut his hair and stopped practicing extreme asceticism. They said, you're a fake ascetic, and they left, right? They saw him on the road and they realized, you have realized something. You understand the nature of reality in a way we don't. And so they requested teachings, and Brahma urged him to teach. But it took him 7 weeks before he did. The conditions need to be right. So by requesting our teachers to remain in samsara, and by requesting them to teach, what we're doing is we are creating the conditions for there to be teachings in the world. We're purifying negative actions we've done in regard to the gurus and in regards to the Dharma. So anytime you have generated a mind of doubt towards the Dharma, or a mind saying this is probably not true, this is a foolish thing, I can't believe this, any of those negative, we say any minds of disparagement or any lokta, any wrong views you've accumulated, that's purified powerfully by your mind requesting the teachings of the Dharma, right? And any negative actions you've done in relation to the guru, whether you've questioned the guru or doubted them or said bad things about them or harmed them in any way, those are purified by requesting them to continue to stay in samsara and teach. So when you request and beseech for the teachers to remain and to continue teaching, you are creating the conditions for yourself and for all sentient beings to receive the Holy Dharma, both in terms of actual discourse, but also in terms of the example of our holy teachers, right? Some of the best teachings we receive isn't through what our teachers tell us, but it's through observing their holy activities and trying to model our behavior on their behavior. When you look at someone like His Holiness Dalai Lama and you see how he lives his life, and you see how he goes about his day, doing meditation, doing practice, how he gives to others, everything he does, when you observe it, then that inspires you to want to be like him, right? Never mind then when you hear him speak and you're motivated by the wisdom in his teaching, but just observing him, you know? So by requesting and beseeching, by these two limbs, what you're doing is you are creating the conditions for you to continually experience Dharma, for you to meet with Mahayana virtuous friends in this life and in future lives, right? So they're incredibly important to do, because if you don't request the teachings, they aren't going to come. That's the truth of it, right? I will say to some extent, even coming to a center like you're doing is part and parcel with requesting and teaching, because you're actively seeking out a spiritual practice, whether you're coming to the center or attending our teachings online. Going out of your way to seek teachings in the Dharma is really powerful. And it is part and parcel with requesting and beseeching, because it's taking a firm grasp onto your own future and saying, I want to be free from suffering. I want to create the conditions for myself and for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. And so the way I do that is seeking out spiritual instruction, seeking out meditation instruction, and so forth. And then the last of the 7 limbs is the limb of dedication. So in general, they say that there are 6 points to understand about dedication. The first is, what are you dedicating? You're dedicating all of your roots of virtue. So that's the first of the 6 points. This is as the Lamrim teachers teach them. So you're not dedicating worldly things. You're dedicating your own merit, the roots of your own virtue. Then why are you dedicating them? You are dedicating them so they don't run out, so they aren't extinguished. By dedicating your merit to others, it prevents you from destroying that merit, right? Just because when you've accumulated some amount of merit, that can all be destroyed in the moment if you generate a mind of anger towards a holy being. But if you've dedicated that merit, you've already mentally given that merit away, you've protected it, so you can't destroy it anymore, right? So you're dedicating your roots of virtues, and why? So they don't run out or become extinguished. And what are you dedicating them for? You are dedicating them for, excuse me, there are generally 3 things. The most important one is to supreme enlightenment. So you're dedicating all of your roots of merit to your own accomplishment of Buddhahood so that you can benefit others. You could also be dedicating them so that you meet Mahayana teachers in this and in all future lives. And you are dedicating them so the Buddhist teachings are alive and active in your mind stream and in the mind stream of others. So usually when we dedicate, we'll have all 3 of those things involved in the dedication. That the Buddhist teachings are alive in our practice, which is to say in our mind stream and the mind streams of others, the Buddhist teachings are alive and active in being practiced. And we dedicate that we might continue to meet holy gurus and teachers who are able to lead us on the path to Buddhahood. And we dedicate so that we ourselves may become perfectly complete Buddhas and realize Buddhahood for the benefit of others. So those are the 3 reasons that we dedicate. Now, depending on the teacher, you might have attended teachings where dedication prayers go on for much longer than that, right? So there, especially Lama Zopa Rinpoche, likes to go on and on and on with dedication prayers. So you could attend whenever he's doing a blessing or a dedication, they could go for quite long. I remember attending when he was teaching in Boston once. He finished his teaching and he got to the house he was staying at, and we made dinner. And I think maybe we finished making dinner around 11:30 at night. And then he blessed it for an hour before we could eat. His like preliminary blessings and prayers and his offerings, because that was more important for him, right? So those actions, they seem very esoteric, right? The same with dedication, but he liked to be very specific. So any merit I've accumulated, yes, it's towards my Buddhahood. Yes, it's that I might continue to meet the teachings of the Buddha and meet qualified Mahayana spiritual friends. And yes, that the teachings of the Buddha are alive in my mind stream and other mind streams, but also it's for all sentient beings who are suffering, for all those who are sick, especially so and so and so and so and so and so who asked me to pray for them, and also for this and also for that. So any specific thing you can dedicate to is useful and powerful because it makes it alive in your mind. But they all are going to really come under those three headings of that the teachings of the Dharma are alive in your mind stream, that you continue to meet the teachings of the Dharma as well as qualified guides, and that you become a Buddha. So that is the third thing. To what end are you dedicating your merits? The fourth thing is for whose sake, right? And this is important. You're not dedicating your merits for your own sake, but for all sentient beings. Whether that is that you might achieve Buddhahood, or that you might have a practice of the Dharma, or you might meet a Mahayana virtuous friend, it's still not for your sake. It's for other sentient beings' sake that you're doing it. That's the fourth. Now, number 5 is how to dedicate. And they say how to dedicate is you should dedicate with right perception. And what that means is bringing in a mind and recognizing the non-true existence of all phenomena. And specifically, you're recognizing the non-inherent existence of the merit you've accumulated, as well as the non-inherent existence of the beings for whom you're dedicating that merit, as well as the end to which you're dedicating it. So often, in some of our dedication prayers, you'll say, I dedicate all the merit I've accumulated, which exists but doesn't exist from its own side, to the perfect, complete realization of Buddhahood, which exists but doesn't exist from its own side, for the sake of all sentient beings who exist, but they don't exist from their own side. So that's bringing what we call the 3 spheres of emptiness, right? Of the merit, the object, and the action, right? Or the purpose. None of them exist inherently. And if you can bring that recollection into your dedication, what that does is it helps generate the mind of wisdom, right? It helps prevent you from clinging. It helps prevent you from clinging to the idea that your merit you've accumulated is like your golden ticket to happiness, because it doesn't exist from its own side. It only exists in dependence on causes and conditions, right? So generating the 3 spheres, recognizing the emptiness of the 3 spheres as you're doing your dedication is powerful. And that is called how to dedicate. You dedicate with the right perception. The dedication that realizes that even that very merit you've accumulated is empty of inherent existence. And then lastly, the nature of your dedication is, so the nature of your dedication is the wish that your virtues don't disappear, but instead transform into the causes for perfect and complete enlightenment. So these 6 aspects are all part of our dedication practice, and you have to be aware of them. What are you dedicating? Which is all of your virtue. Why are you dedicating it? So they aren't exhausted. What end are you dedicating it towards? To supreme enlightenment. For whose benefit are you dedicating it? The benefit of all sentient beings. How are you dedicating it? You're dedicating it with a mind of right perception that realizes it doesn't exist inherently. And what is the nature of the dedication itself? It is the transformation of your virtue into the causes of perfect and complete enlightenment, which is to say, unending happiness for yourself and all sentient beings. They say that the example they give of why dedication is important, if all of the virtue you've created, whether it be in this practice or in your whole lifetime, if that is a horse, the dedication is like the bridle that helps guide it to the right place so it doesn't run wild, right? So dedication is taking your virtuous actions and then pointing them in the right direction so they're not wasted in that way. And this is, again, something we can do all of the time, right? When we dedicate. Whenever you go out, dedication isn't about building up your own ego, but it is recognizing, similar to rejoicing. Rejoicing in your own merit isn't about building up your own ego, but when you engage in a virtuous activity, you should be proud of that, right? And not a harmful type of pride, which we would say is nargil in Tibetan. There are different types of pride, different actually different types of mental factors, that we would translate them all as pride in English, but they have different definitions in Tibetan. So this isn't pride, but this is recognizing you've engaged in something virtuous and finding joy in that, right? And the same with dedication. If you go out of your way to help someone, then you can be like, that was a good thing I did. So I can generate a mind of rejoicing that I engage in that virtuous activity, and then I dedicate that virtue to away to sentient beings. You can do that all throughout your day with all of your small actions. You don't have to make a big production of it, okay? So as I mentioned, the seven limb prayer is paralleling our activity of a Buddha, where a Buddha has perfected and completed all of their abandonment of all obscurations and their accumulation of all wisdom and all merit and all good qualities, right? So our seven limb practice, which we should do at the beginning of our meditation practice, but then throughout the day, is focused on accumulation and purification. And so specifically, they say that the act of prostrating helps eliminate your mind of pride. The act of making offerings helps eliminate miserliness, both past miserliness and your current propensity to be miserly. Confession eliminates all actions of all three poisons. So attachment, hatred, and ignorance, all of those get decreased by generating a mind of regret and confessing negative actions. Rejoicing eliminates a mind of jealousy. Requesting eliminates any possibility of discarding the Dharma or acting in a non-Dharmic way or speaking poorly of the Dharma. Beseeching your teachers remain is an antidote to disparaging your teachers or any of the holy beings. And then dedication, they say actually, is an antidote to anger because it's focused on virtue for the benefit of others. And the reason these serve as antidotes is because to serve as an antidote means that it's impossible to have this mind simultaneously with its opposite, right? So you can't have a mind of happiness and a mind of sadness at the same time, simultaneously, at least not manifest. You can have one that's like sublimated, right? But it's impossible to have one mind that has two contradictory elements like that. And so when you have a mind of prostration or of homage, it's impossible to have a mind of pride because you're humbling yourself and generating respect, right? So you can't have those simultaneously. And the same goes for all the others that I listed. When you have a mind of generosity, you can't have a mind of miserliness and so forth. So by generating these seven limbs in your mental continuum, right, and by engaging in them throughout the day, you're preventing the possibility of these other harmful minds from arising, right? If you spend all of your day rejoicing in virtue and in the results of virtue, there's no opportunity for you to experience jealousy and so forth. So in general, we'd say this whole practice is about accumulation, purification, and increase. Increase meaning strengthening what merit you've accumulated. So the whole practice embodies those three. But if you want to be more specific, the practices of homage, of offering, of requesting, beseeching, and in rejoicing in others' actions, those accumulate merit. The action of confession purifies negative actions. And then the actions of dedicating merit and rejoicing in your own virtues increases the strength of those merits. So that's how it's broken down, if you want the breakdown, right? The different parts of the puzzle that work together. Okay. I wanted to leave time for meditation and then time for Q&A at the end. So I thought I'd lead us through a meditation. I'm going to do maybe more abbreviated than I had originally planned, but that's okay. So take a moment to arrange yourself in a comfortable seat, in a comfortable position. I'm going to enjoy a little bit more coconut water as you do that. It's very dignified sitting here, drinking out of a coconut. Okay, so let's adopt a comfortable seat, whatever that is for you. Okay. Most important is that you feel balanced, you feel secure, you feel stable. So whether you're sitting in a chair or on a cushion or flat, whether you're sitting with your legs crossed or not, or in full lotus, half lotus, however you are, you want to feel stable and connected, okay? If you are sitting in a chair, you don't want your ankles crossed. You want both of your feet flat on the ground. So I'll just go through the posture very quickly. You want, in addition to having a firm base, you want your spine to be nice and straight. And now, of course, we know that the spine itself has a natural curve to it, but you can visualize your spine as if it were a stack of coins, nice and straight. That allows your chest to be open, right? If you're slouched down, then you are compressing, or if you're arched back, you're opening. Both of those are going to affect your ability to breathe, your ability to focus. So you want your spine just to be nice and straight. And you, you let your head follow the natural curve of your neck. So your head is just slightly curved inward. Your chin isn't tucked down. You aren't lifted up too high, but just following the natural curve of your body. Your hands, you can either have them in the common meditative mudra, which is your right hand on top of your left, palms up, your thumbs just barely touching, and these themselves located right around the area of your navel with your elbows out like this. Or instead of this mudra, you can just allow your hands to rest flat on your thighs or your knees, wherever they naturally fall. So you can just lift up your hands, let them fall on your thighs, and rest there, whichever is more comfortable for you. Next, you want your jaw to be nice and loose, no tightness in your jaw. It'll probably even hang open a little, and that's okay. You can allow your tongue to rest on your hard palate on the roof of your mouth behind your teeth. For many people, this is the most awkward part of the position when they're first starting because they're not used to it. But it's actually quite important because it helps prevent saliva from pooling in your mouth, which then becomes an obstacle to your meditation. And then lastly, ideally, you will keep your eyes half open. So we don't want our eyes closed. We're not trying to fall asleep. We're trying to wake up. So allow your eyes to be half open and your gaze is following just the bridge of your nose to a space in front, maybe about 2 meters in front of you, that is not focused on any one particular object in front of you, but it's just loose and open in front. And as you settle your body into this posture, allow your breathing to follow into its own natural rhythm. You don't force it. And so before we begin the body of our meditation, we'll take a few minutes to calm our minds and engage in a mindfulness meditation where we observe our breath, allow ourselves to develop some single pointed concentration or something in that direction. And so if it's helpful, as you breathe in, you can say to yourself, breathing in. And then as you breathe out, you can say breathing out. You can apply this label to your breath to help your mind stay focused on it. And obviously, there are many distractions external to our body, distractions to all of our senses, but don't allow them to pull you away from your meditative object. So try to stay focused, breathing in, breathing out. And when you notice you have become distracted, either by a sound or a sight or a smell, a physical sensation, or by a mental distraction, recognize you've been distracted. You can label it distraction, and then simply let it go and return your awareness to your breathing. It's important not to judge that distraction as good or bad, and not judge yourself for being distracted. You simply recognize distraction and then return to your focus. Now that our minds have settled a little, I want you to actively generate a mind of compassion. The wish for all sentient beings to be free from all suffering and the causes of all suffering. Allow this wish, this mind to grow in your mind. If it helps, it can take the form of brilliant white light at your heart, growing and filling you from the inside out, this wish that all sentient beings be free from suffering. Allow that to be the focus of your practice. Now let that wish transform into the aspiration that I will achieve Buddhahood to liberate all sentient beings from suffering for their sake. So that compassion serves as the primal cause for you to generate a mind of bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha yourself. So allow that mind of compassion to transform into the aspiration to achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of others. As I aspire to be a Buddha, then like a Buddha, I need to accumulate all merits, purify all negativities, and increase all of the merits I have already created. And so I will engage in this practice of the seven limbs toward that effect, generate this motivation, this confidence. And now in the space in front of you, I'd like you to visualize the Buddha who is inseparable from your guru, who is inseparable from all of the Buddhas and all of the holy beings that exist. If you're able to, you can envision countless Buddhas, or they can all be embodied in Shakyamuni Buddha himself in the space in front of you. Now I want you to visualize your body, enormous in size, and visualize all of your past lives taking human form and forming a great congregation behind you. And then behind them, visualize all sentient beings taking the form of humans and forming part of this giant congregation who you are leading in these practices. So take a moment to really solidify this visualization of yourself leading a giant congregation, as well as the Buddha in front, embodying your teacher and all Buddhas. And now generating a mind of great respect and devotion. Prostrate your entire body. Visualize the prostration of your body to all the Buddhas. So visualize yourself doing complete full prostrations. Repeatedly requesting the blessings of the holy body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas, and prostrating yourself at their feet. And all of the sentient beings behind you are following your example. And similarly, they're prostrating with minds of strong respect and devotion and humility. And you can say to yourself as you engage in these visualized prostrations, I prostrate my body, speech, and mind at the feet of all the Buddhas. Now visualize infinite pleasurable offerings piled up in heaps in front of you. Clouds of offerings of all the objects that are pleasant to all the senses, things that are pleasant to view, things that are pleasant to taste, to touch, to smell, to listen to. The most beautiful and pleasant objects that you can conceive of. Mountains worth of infinite pleasurable objects appear before you, and you and all of the crowd behind you offer these objects of pleasure and delight to all the Buddhas. And as you make these objects of infinite delight, it causes there to be joy in the Buddha's mind. So visualize the act of making infinite offerings that are selfless, that expect nothing in return, that don't have even the taste of self-interest or of clinging. And as soon as you make an offering, imagine more offerings emerge to take their place. Infinite clouds of offerings. Beautiful flowers, fragrant incense, perfumed oil for massaging the skin, the sound of drums and music and venas, other objects that are beautiful to view, foods that have the most phenomenal of tastes. All of these objects appear before you, and without any hesitation, you offer them to all the Buddhas. Now visualize that you have lowered yourself so you're on your right knee in front of the Buddhas, as has the whole congregation of sentient beings behind you. And in this position, you request all the Buddhas to continue turning the wheel of Dharma, to continue teaching what it means to live a spiritual and meaningful life, and you request that they exist in samsara until it is emptied of all sentient beings. So you request and beseech at the same time that they remain and they continue to teach. And these requests come from your heart and from your mouth and from those of all the sentient beings who are following your example with the fervent wish that you never be separated from the holy Dharma. You make these requests. And along with these requests, allow your mind to rejoice in the infinite good activities and virtue of those holy beings in the space in front. This mind of joy and virtue, this rejoicing, can take the form of white light that is filling your body, starting at your heart and then spreading until it fills your entire body from the inside out. Until this mental experience of joy is radiating from all of your pores and brings the physical sensation of joy as well. Joy in the virtue of those holy beings that are in front of you. And through these actions of prostration, offering, requesting, beseeching, and generating a mind of rejoicing in other beings' virtue, you engage in the practice of accumulating merit. This merit filling your body and your mind, overflowing from your pores. And now, continuing to visualize yourself on your right knee, mentally confess all negative actions you've done in this life, starting with the actions you've done today, and then the actions you've done in recent memory, the actions you've done in this life, the actions you've done in past lives that you may not remember. All actions that are contradictory to the teachings of the Dharma. All actions that accumulate non-virtue, that have been harmful to yourself and others. Whether you remember them or not, generate a mind of strong regret for having engaged in these actions and confess them mentally to the Buddhas in front. As you confess these actions, you can visualize the negative karma. As you confess these actions, you can visualize the negative karma you've created as a result of those actions leaks out of you like black smoke or black oily tar that is leaving your body as you confess it. Your mind of regret fills you with brilliant white light, and it forces these negative karmas to be expelled from your body and then to dissolve into nothingness once they leave your body. Most important, generate that strong mind of regret. And paired with that mind is the aspiration to never again engage in those harmful actions. And now, as you have engaged in the limbs of accumulation and purification, we want to increase whatever merit we've created. So first, we generate the mind of rejoicing at our own virtuous activities. Now that we've confessed our non-virtuous activities, we rejoice in our own virtue, not just the virtue of others, of the Buddhas in front, but we recognize that we have accumulated some merit. We have engaged in virtuous activities in this life and in past lives, and we rejoice. We generate a mind of joy in response to those virtuous activities we've done. And allow that mind of rejoicing to transform into one of dedication, where all of this incredible merit you've accumulated, which is empty from its own side, which exists conventionally but doesn't inherently exist, all of this merit, we dedicate it to the perfect, complete enlightenment, which itself is empty from its own side. It exists conventionally, but it has no inherent existence. For the benefit of all sentient beings who are empty from their own side. So you can visualize this infinite white light of merit you've accumulated, exiting your body in a brilliant array, erupting from all of your pores. And as it does, it encompasses all of the earth and all of existence and is absorbed into the bodies of all suffering sentient beings. It is for their benefit that you dedicate yourself towards enlightenment. So you can visualize your merit streaming out of your body in this way. And I dedicate all the merit I've accumulated, which is empty from its own side, to the perfect, complete enlightenment, which is empty from its own side, for the sake of all sentient beings who are empty from their own side. That all sentient beings might experience the perfect and complete bliss of Buddhahood. And that I will lead them to that state of perfection. And in your act of dedication, which seals the seven-limb practice, visualize that all the Buddhas in front are incredibly overfilled with joy at your practice. Your practice brings delight to their minds. And in this mind of delight, they dissolve into brilliant white light. And all of the visualized bodies of other sentient beings and of your past lives that are behind you dissolve into brilliant white light. And so all that's left is your own body in space, still emitting brilliant white light of merit to all others. And then slowly that light is absorbed back into your heart. The fuel and motivation and inspiration for your practice, filling you, never being separate from your mind. And then, as you're ready, allow your awareness to return to the room. Great. Thank you so much. So you see how that practice can be incredibly powerful, right? And it can be a practice that you can do much more elaborately than I did here, very quickly, and that you embody all seven limbs of practice at once. Or you can focus on just one of the seven limbs, and then the next day, focus on the other. So you still should do all seven in your practice, but maybe only do a minute or two of the first one, and then spend 15 minutes just meditating on offering, and then do a minute or two on the rest, like that. And that way, you can increase them sequentially. But either way, by concluding all of those aspects in your practice, you accumulate and purify both. And so the part of bringing this to our class today was, and I don't have too much time to talk about it now, or anytime really, is to realize that those seven activities, right, of engaging in prostration, of making offerings, confessing negative actions, and generating a mind of regret as part of that confession, rejoicing in virtuous activities, requesting, beseeching, and dedicating. Those aren't simply what we do in our meditation. We should do them in all of our worldly activities as well, motivated by minds of refuge and compassion, or refuge and bodhicitta. With those as our motivating factors, we should engage in those seven activities all of the time, whenever we see the opportunity to. And by doing that, what we're doing, the main focus of them is not allowing space for for negative minds to arise. And most importantly, we are separating ourselves from our ego, right? We are not letting ourselves be the center of the story. We're always prioritizing others. So all of these actions go to prioritize others in some way. And what that does is it doesn't allow us to have a pity party about myself. It doesn't allow me to focus on my own needs, right, as being more important than others. Obviously, we have to be realistic. There are things we need. We need to eat, we need shelter, we need clothing as best we can, right? But we're not focused on that as the goal of our activities, right? Those are only means to allow us to serve others. So try to incorporate these seven into all of our activities, which means we have to be able to remember them too. So when we say a seven-limb prayer, we should right away know what are the seven limbs I'm talking about. They are prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, requesting, beseeching, and dedicating. All of them fueled by refuge and bodhicitta. And then when we make our minds familiar with them, then we're not separate from them. So they become natural part of our activities. So I think I'll leave it there, just because I have run out of time. But are there any questions that we want to bring up before we finish? Okay. I don't have the chats in front of me. Can you just ask them? Okay, or you can just ask it for me. Okay.
Nivedita, she said, how do you forget past memories and people who have hurt you? How to forgive others?
To forgive or forget?
How to forget past memories and how to forgive others?
I see. That is an extensive question. We don't want to forget past memories, first off. Forgetting isn't useful, right? Because forgetting is trying to suggest that it didn't happen, right? So forgetting isn't a useful thing. What is useful is not allowing it to occupy our mind as being continuing over and over again. So we don't want to forget what others have done to us or what we've done to others, right? Forgetting it is not a useful thing, but we don't want it to be the prime focus of our attention. So we want to strip it of its power, right? And the way we strip it of its power is by practicing the opposite. So if others have hurt us or if we've hurt others, we then want to engage in virtuous activities, which are more powerful than the harmful activities. And so depending on what actions we're trying to counteract, different virtuous activities will take their place. How to forgive others? In brief, this is a big topic, right? In brief, we have to recognize that all sentient beings are suffering sentient beings. We all are existing in samsara. All sentient beings are the exact same in that we want happiness, we don't want suffering, and we don't understand the distinction between happiness and suffering. That's why we create more suffering for ourselves. And so those beings that are harming us in any way, whether they intend to harm us or don't intend to harm us, what they're trying to do is be happy. And they don't understand that their actions aren't the causes of happiness, but are instead the causes of suffering. So in fact, what they're doing is creating more suffering for themselves. So the way we want to, what helps us to forgive them is to realize that all they are doing is they themselves are suffering and they're creating more suffering for themselves. And no matter the amount of suffering they may be causing in our lives, the truth is they're creating even more suffering for themselves, right? Because what they're doing is creating the seeds for future negative rebirths that are going to last much longer than any physical or mental suffering that they create in this one lifetime, right? Which is why we say, if we're looking at our own mind, that the outer enemies, are nothing. Like this life and my happiness in this life is nothing compared to all of my future lives. So if I develop a mind of anger, that's so much more dangerous and harmful to me than an infinite number of external enemies. Because the worst thing an external enemy can do is take my life. But my mind of anger, the inner enemy, can cause lifetimes of suffering over and over and over again. And whenever anyone is causing you harm, that's what they're doing, creating more suffering for themselves. So the way we forgive them is, first off, obviously, take whatever necessary worldly steps you can to not put yourself in the space of harm if you're able to do that, right? You shouldn't allow yourself, if you have the ability to remove yourself from a harmful situation, you should do that. But then once you've done that, then the actual mind of forgiving them is recognizing they're acting out of their own karma and delusions with the wish to be happy, but a misunderstanding of the nature of reality and not knowing how to go about being happy. And that is what will allow you to generate a mind of forgiveness, right? Okay.
I have one question.
Dear Venerable,
Yes.
hello.
Yes.
Yes, dear Venerable, thank you for today's session. It was very enlightening, and you spoke about fears earlier during the session, like we have to think whether fear will be helpful to us or no, and accordingly, we need to take proper actions. Are there any good books on how to manage fear? Good Buddhist books on how to manage fear?
So the question has to do with how to manage fear to make sure that you're cultivating a healthy fear and not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by unhealthy fear. And if there are any recommendations for readings, well, it depends on what the fear is. I know that Kapjalama Rinpoche has a book called there's one book about how to, what's it called? There's one book that's called Healthy Fear. And there's another one that is How to Have a Happy Death or something like this. And these are both about fears of your own mortality and how to cultivate a healthy fear that allows you, promotes your engaging in spiritual activity. So one is called Healthy Fear, and the other one is called, I think, How to Die Happy or something like this. Those are both books by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. But honestly, any of the teachings, especially by His Holiness or by Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Lama Yeshe, that are teaching the introductory stages of the path, what they're going to be teaching you to do is how to convert any harmful minds into motivations to practice virtue. So those are all going to help you overcome your fear. And they're going to help you take your anxieties in this life and transform them into the fuel to ensure you don't experience suffering in future lives. So any of the introductory teachings, I can't think of other specific texts right now, but any of the books by His Holiness that are general overviews of Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism in general will all touch on this point in a meaningful way. So I'm sorry I don't have more specific recommendations on top of my head. You know, part of the difficulty of having lived in the monastery for as long as I have is I don't read any English language Dharma books anymore, just because I don't have time to. And so when people ask for recommendations, you know, the books I read 20 years ago. And so I need to try to update myself with contemporary books. And there are a lot of great books available. I just don't have them, a bibliography in my head right now. But, you know, His Holiness has recently, they finished the last volume in an extensive series that His Holiness is writing in with Ani Thupten Chodron, who is an American nun. And she is taking all of his teachings and then compiling them. So she's doing the writing, but based on his teachings, and then he is editing them. And it's a 10-volume series, and they just released the 10th volume, being published by Wisdom Publications. I know we have some of them here at the center to borrow, and these go through all of the aspects of the Buddhist path. So those are a really wonderful resource as well. They cover everything, including generating a healthy fear, which encourages a mind of refuge and encourages virtuous activity. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Venerable. Any books on also stopping unhealthy fear?
I can't think of any specifically right now. I'm sorry. You have to go through the library. If you have an opportunity to visit here at Kurukula Center, that's the center in Boston, Choe Khor Sum Ling, we have a whole library of books that are available to borrow. But I'll try to go through some and think of some titles that I may be able to bring to suggest next week. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I apologize. Again, anything by His Holiness is going to help with that. Anything where you are generating a mind of strong motivation to practice virtue is going to necessarily not leave the mental space for you to generate fear, right? So fear takes hold in your mind when you don't have confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. When you have confidence in and strong refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and you have confidence in the law of cause and effect, those understandings are what allow you to remove yourself from all fear, because you're confident in what actual virtuous practice is and how to go about engaging in that virtuous practice and how to be free from suffering. So having confidence in those things allows you to not have fear anymore, because you know this is what I have to do. Like, these are the right steps I need to take to be free from suffering and to help others. And therefore that confidence allows you to be free from fear. So any books that are teaching about refuge and any books that are teaching about karma and are going to teach you how to be free from fear. Do you have a question?
Given the fact that thought is a form of energy and energy has power.
I'm sorry, what is a form of energy?
Thought
okay.
is a form of energy and energy has power. So when we send out, let's say, a thought of loving kindness to someone far away, does it really have a powerful impact on the person, or is it just impacting on us in our own mind? So does it really, in the real world, impact? Because when we do metta meditation, we talk to, send blessings, a metta to invisible beings and beings living far away. Does it really impact on them? Or is it only impacting on us?
So the question has to do with when we engage in these practices, where we're generating minds of compassion and so forth for other sentient beings. Are we actually changing their lives, or is it only for our own mind? And the answer is both, but mostly it's for our own mind, right? So if I am trying to generate a mind of compassion for others that wish you be free from suffering and all the causes of suffering, right? Or if I'm doing a practice like mind training, like Lojong practice, where I'm taking your suffering, I'm visualizing taking your suffering and giving you my happiness, right? Or I'm engaging in exchanging self and others. So I transfer a mind of self-cherishing into a mind of cherishing others' happiness. What that prayer does is, as we mentioned, and we mentioned this yesterday in our discussion of karma, my engaging in that prayer does help create the conditions for other sentient beings' own positive karma to ripen, right? But I can't create that karma for them. So if they haven't created the conditions, or the causes rather, to experience happiness, and then they've only created causes that will ripen as suffering, then there's nothing I can do to give them more. They have to plant the seeds themselves. But my prayers and my wish and my meditation can help, clean up their field, so to speak. It can help fertilize their field to encourage their own virtuous minds to ripen. So I can't directly cause them to experience freedom from suffering, but I can help create the conditions where they are free from suffering and experience that compassion. So that's one aspect. The more important aspect is it's changing our minds. It is realigning our minds so that our habitual patterns are patterns of focusing on others and not focusing on ourselves. So the worldly impact is hard to measure. And in general, the worldly impact for the way it affects others in an immediate sense is something that we aren't able to measure, because all it is doing is making the condition or helping improve the conditions for them to experience happiness. But they still have to create those causes themselves, right? But the more important thing it's doing is realigning the way we experience the world around us and how we exist in the world and how we relate to others. And that's far more powerful. And if our mind can always be, focused on compassion, then that changes how we physically act in the world as well. Right? So me generating a mind of compassion right now for other sentient beings, it can affect the actions I've already taken. But then moving forward, my actual actions in the world are going to be focused on bringing about their happiness, both worldly happiness and spiritual happiness. So then going forward, if that mind of compassion is motivating me and is never separate from my mind, then it actually does affect their happiness, because it's physically creating the conditions for them to be happy as well.
That would be limited to the people who we interact
that would be limited to the ones we interact with. But then the actual mind of helping create positive conditions for their own positive karmic seeds to ripen, that is infinite for all sentient beings. Okay? If you generate that, it can be infinite for all sentient beings. If you generate the aspiration in the mind for it to be. Okay, I think we're gonna have to end it there, because 12:30. I apologize having to run out on all of you today. Before we end, let's go ahead and dedicate. So our practice was virtuous in the beginning by setting a strong motivation that we aren't engaging in this practice merely for our own benefit, but so that we might be able to benefit others. And our practice was virtuous in the middle by actually engaging in the study of the teachings of the Buddha, by trying to understand them, trying to make them familiar with our minds. And now we seal our practice by making it virtuous at the end, by dedicating any merit we've accumulated. And so, as we discussed in the Seven Limb Prayer, we can dedicate that merit ultimately for their own complete perfect enlightenment, for the state of Buddhahood, so that we might be able to benefit all sentient beings. We also dedicate it so that we ourselves might have the teachings of the Buddha alive in our mind stream, and that other sentient beings also might have the teachings of the Buddha alive and active in their mind stream. And we dedicate that merit so that we might continue to meet with the teachings and with qualified teachers who can share those teachings with us and show us the path to enlightenment. And so in those three ways, with those three aims, we dedicate this merit which is itself empty of all true existence. We dedicate it to those three aims, especially to perfect complete enlightenment, which is itself empty of true existence. And we dedicate it for the sake not of our own happiness or our own benefit in this life, but for the sake of all sentient beings, that they might experience freedom from all suffering, they who are also empty from their own side. So generate a strong mind dedicating any merit you've accumulated. And we will recite very briefly the dedication prayers on page 36 of the Golden Book. We'll do the 2 verses of dedication. Then we'll repeat that second verse in Tibetan. We'll do them first in English, then we'll do that second verse in Tibetan, and then we'll recite in English the long life prayer for His Holiness Dalai Lama, the short long life prayer. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel of bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Shanshu sem shorim poshe ma ke panam ke gyurchi ke wanyam pa me pa yang gone gonde pelwa sho. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chanrezik Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. Those of you here in person and online, I appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you again. We're going to continue having in-person teachings for the next 4 weeks. I'll be here next week, both Saturday and Sunday, and then some other teachers after that. But I look forward to seeing you in our classes there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us online and offline. Please, there's some refreshments.